You're looking at pictures there of Governor Mike Sonko literally handing over key duties, key functions of the county of Nairobi to the national government. I'm joined by Dr. Alutalala Mkhwana, Dr. Collins Odote, and Dr. Alex Awiti here, talking about what this means. And gentlemen, Dr. Alutalala.
Yes, you got it right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You referred to the body language in that picture.
Yes.
That said it all. The body language said it all.
Yes, Jeff. I mean, have you seen the president right behind Governor Sonko? I mean, he was literally his aide-de-camp, looking at every letter and how it was going.
Yeah.
This guy can't be trusted even when you're present. So the idea was, you have to deliver it our style.
Yeah.
And in my view, what we are seeing has been precipitated by a lot of movement behind the curtains. You must remember, Jeff, that this guy is facing a battle of his life, two-pronged, in the assembly and in the courts.
Yeah.
Who would stand up to the government in such circumstances? You'd bend over backwards in a hope that some behind-the-scenes moves will come to your rescue.
So, Dr. Odote, was this a deal struck? Was his arm twisted? Or did he preempt what was going to happen?
Jeff, I don't think Governor Sonko preempted. I think Governor Sonko was happy for the preemption because he knew what was going to happen. I think when he was ready to... You see, when you know that you are cornered, this was the best for him because still he remains governor, and now he's actually governor with less problems. You don't have to do the work. You just have to earn a salary and still continue playing your politics. So for him, that saved him. But going back to the photo, the other three things that are interesting in that photo, I think Dr. Mkhwana talks about one of them, which is, what was the president doing there? Because if this was being signed by being transferred from one government to the other, he would only have been there if he was signing. If he wasn't signing, why was he standing there? That's why the guy looked out of place. But the second person who I kept on asking myself what he was doing there is actually Eugene. With which functions were being transferred? Functions of health. Functions of transport. Eugene is not a cabinet secretary for any of those people.
And planning.
So as he is sitting there and signing, so today, are we going to hold Eugene accountable for performance of those functions? Because the one who signed them.
But he's in charge of devolution in general,
yeah,
right?
But functions were said to the exact person. To the people who should have been signing, in my view, we should have been transferring functions by the respective ministers. Yeah. Because then when you transfer health, you're transferring to the CS Health, the one who will hold accountable. He wasn't there. The third thing is my good friend, the Attorney General, was there. And if I see the legal issues that people are raising about this process, I wonder how well he advised the national government in terms of doing this. So those are the three things that I also see in the photo that I think is interesting to discuss.
Dr. Alex Awiti, it's a good segue to the fact that, is this legal, what happened yesterday? Is it legal?
I think the constitutional provisions make it legal. There is a lot of loud, resounding silence in the manner of transfer in the Intergovernmental Relations Act. So I think when you read them together, I think there is some cover around which they could buy time. As we said during the break, they could then institutionalize a formal process for the transfer. But right now, the cover is there in the vacuum and in some of the voids that are in the Constitution and in the Intergovernmental Relations Act, which basically is supposed to be activating Article 187 of the Constitution. But as we pointed out, the regulations have already been written in that. And what is also interesting is that even though the powers have been transferred from the county to the national government, the constitutional responsibility still rests with the county government. So again, the question is it a transfer or a transfer? You know, it's almost like a gentleman's agreement. And as Collins has basically said, this provides Sonko with it saves face for Sonko. It's a very honorable way to exit a very, very messy kind of, you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. You know, those two things. You're facing legal action and you're facing a potential impeachment in the county assembly.
So Dr. Mkhwana, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I wanted to add something. Jeff, your question is, was it legal? Without a doubt, it was. It was not the neatest, but it was. Number one, you look at Article 187 of the Constitution, it tells you about the transfer of powers between two levels of government. Two levels of government are defined as the county government on one hand and the national government on the other hand. Now, it says that this power may be transferred from one level to another, and it gives the objects and the principles that must guide that process. But what Dr. is saying is key here, that whereas the Constitution provides for that transfer, we have to look for the neater details in the Intergovernmental Relations Act. Now, Jeff, whenever an act is enacted, the procedures of how to implement it are always provided for in the regulations. So that when we are talking about the procedure that was followed, whether it was right or wrong, we ought to be guided by the regulations. I'm not aware that the regulations were ever enacted, and I think Dr. says they weren't. That means, therefore, that what the government has done is to attain its objective because of that apparent lacuna, and then start now mending fences. And that's why they have said we shall have public participation. Public participation is mentioned, I think, in section between 27, 28, all the way up to 38.
29,
and 29. But it doesn't give the modalities. And so the government have more or less a blank check to play around there. And so if you ask, and Dr. says the Attorney General was there, didn't he advise the state? Of course, as you know, from the days of Honourable Moswako, then came the other Attorney Generals. When you get these jobs, it's not so much about what you have here in terms of professionalism. It's about what are the interests that you're serving. So you have to temper, professionalism and the interests you're serving. For God's sake, you're appointed by the president, and he's a politician.
Yeah, even in America, it's the same thing.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Dr.
this is the one area where I slightly disagree with my colleagues. I think there's constitutional powers to transfer from one level to the other. But I think the process in which this was done falls short of certain legal requirements. Let me start with the one that my colleagues have spoken about. Public participation, I think, is mandatory under the Constitution. It's alluded to in the Intergovernmental Relations Act. The fact that even government is now doing it shows they recognize that they should have done it. Doing it now is for what purpose? Because public participation is supposed to influence a decision. They are telling us this decision will come into effect 21 days from today, but we have already entered into it and signed. If today, as part of the discussions, because one of the reasons why you transfer functions is because one level is unable to perform it, they don't have capacity. If today it's then decided, oh no, by the way, of these functions you are transferring, we actually have capacity to perform the functions of health. That's what the public consultations say. Do you think the decision will be changed? No. Secondly, Jeff, we know the challenges that Governor Sonko has been going through. We know that. I'm watching for evidence that Governor Sonko had a cabinet meeting to be able to have conversations around the functions that they were transferring. I'm looking for that. Thirdly, Jeff, I know from the county assembly dynamics that the county assembly was taken aback. This is not the kind of thing that I think you just wake up and do. The Constitution says the county assembly should be notified. Definitely doesn't say when. But I think good sense would require that as you enter into the conversations, you bring them on board. That's when, because this is not a small thing. And the reason why this is important, Jeff, as I was coming in, a friend of mine told me, this is the death of devolution. Because of the message that sends, I think the manner in which this was done should have been done in a much more legitimate manner. And I think, in my view, I would fall foul of saying, I don't think this meets the legal requirement.
Yeah, real quick, Dr. Awiti, before we go to break, why not dissolve the county altogether? Dissolve it and have Nairobi run a part of the national government like they do in Abuja or Washington, D.C.
Too many booby traps.
Well, I guess that could be kind of the path, the end of that path, if we were to kind of take this in a logical way. But that will be kind of getting ahead of ourselves. I think what we've done now is transfer 4 key functions of the county government back to the central government, the national government. But to Collins's point about the manner in which this was done, I think all of these things you say are valid. Notify the county assembly, public participation. But we're looking at a situation of insane government dysfunction. Sonko is barred from accessing his office and therefore even constituting the the mechanisms to appraise his cabinet executive committee, county executive committee on the decisions he was about to make. The assembly is hostile to him. So I think if you look at all these circumstances under which the Nairobi County obtains, it was really difficult to kind of execute this in a methodic way. But I think fundamentally, as we have suggested, Section 187, we're not in the process was not in violation of Section 187 in spirit, and not in violation of Section 29 of Article 187 of the Constitution, and not in violation of Section 29 of the Intergovernmental Relations Act. I think what is problematic is doing the public participation after the fact, and as you rightly point out, what's the point?
Let's take a break and then we'll come back, Doctor, and talk about the fact that why couldn't they have waited until the impeachment move next week? Why did they put the cart before the horse here? And also, who takes care of the day-to-day? Kajo and MCAs, what happens to them in the cabinet? You know, there's so many questions and Nairobians want to know. Let's talk about that when we come back. Keep tweeting, and also your tweets. We'll read them too when we come back. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.